Hi, this is Congressman Tom Cole, 4th District of Oklahoma. It's another one of our weekly chats. Well, I think this week would be a week where I would say Congress at least avoided a disaster. It didn't get done some of the things I would like it to have gotten done, but it got the big thing done, and that was it kept the government funded. As some of you may know, there was an agreement struck on September 30th to keep the government open. It ran through November 17th. That meant we had to do something this weekend or it would have shut down. We have moved a number of appropriations bills during that time frame which fund the government. The Senate has moved a few, but obviously neither chamber has moved enough, nor have they sat down and reconciled them in a way where we could move ahead in government funding. And that's unfortunate. This whole process has been too slow. Honestly, the Senate didn't pass any bills the last 2 years, and then this year only got 3 done. The House has actually done 7 and have funded about 75% of the federal government. Now, again, we still have to sit down with the Senate, come to an agreement, get that through both houses, and get the president to sign it. But we're a lot further along in the process than the Senate is, and honestly, we're a lot further along in the process than Democrats were either of the last 2 years, if you look at it just in terms of how many individual bills have gone across the floor and what percentage of the government they actually fund. But this week, we had to make a decision. It was very controversial because a lot of people around here, instead of just passing what's called a clean CR, continuing resolution to keep the government open, always want to add something to it or want to try to cut spending in it. But if you need both parties, you have to basically keep it pretty clean unless each side has something they both agree on and you want to add that. And there were actually a couple of items where that was the case. But again, some people want to go a lot deeper in terms of cuts than you can get because you can't pass them through the Senate. They won't be signed by the president, and you don't even have necessarily a majority in favor of them in the House. So those kind of people that call for those sorts of measures and then vote no to funding the government expect the rest of us to do the responsible thing. And this week we did. And the responsible thing was to make sure that our soldiers, men and women in uniform, got paid. Responsible thing is to make sure that our air traffic controllers who keep the skies safe for us got paid. Responsible thing to do is to make sure that Americans that needed essential services for government, whether it was a passport to travel or a Social Security issue to be resolved or veterans to be taken care of, got their issues dealt with. None of those things would happen if we were in the middle of a government shutdown. And anybody that thinks a government shutdown is going to work needs to think about the last 3. There was one in 2013 the Republicans did to try and force the repeal of Obamacare. Obamacare is still here. The Democrats actually shut down the government to try and force changes in the so-called DACA programs that deal with the long-term citizenship and legal status questions of people that were brought to the country illegally, but as children, when they clearly were not responsible for it themselves. No changes were made in 2017. The President Trump had a partial government shutdown in 2018 to 19 to finish the wall. That didn't happen either. Government shutdowns simply don't work. What they do is inconvenience the American people. You don't never achieve the objective. And honestly, you put some innocent people at risk, for a dispute where they're not responsible for the division. So again, I was very proud to see Congress operate in a bipartisan way and keep government open. Now, the way this deal works is we're only open until January 19th for part of the government and through February the 2nd for most of it. So we need to get bills passed and agreements made during this time frame, and I'll certainly be working hard to achieve that objective. If we don't, we'll probably have what's called a long-term CR. That would not be good for defense. That would not be good for the country. It freezes spending, but it also, in a dangerous world, effectively cuts defense. And through the way the deal was negotiated, you'd still have more domestic spending than while you're cutting defense. So that's clearly not the appropriate way to move forward. But at least we bought the time, and we'll see if Congress can work better going forward. In the interim, we did move more appropriations legislation, that is voting on amendments. Unfortunately, we still have serious disagreements inside the Republican caucus. So even though all the bills we're talking about cut spending, some people think they don't cut it enough, so they won't vote for the bills. Other people think they cut it too much, so they won't vote for the bills. And when you have a 3 or 4 vote majority, that gets in the way of passing important legislation like the so-called Criminal Justice and Science Act, which funds those agencies of government, or the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Act, which funds those parts of government. We've gotten a lot of the work done, certainly on the so-called THUD bill, Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development. We haven't gotten final passage yet because, again, we have some people that think it cuts too much money in some areas, and other people that think, well, we should cut more. And sadly, you got to get together and split the difference on these things and move forward. At the end of the day, whatever we pass in the House isn't going to be the final product anyway. The Senate still has to pass its bill, and then you have to sit down and work out the differences. So people that draw lines in the sand early in the process aren't helping us solve the problem. They're simply exacerbating the problem. You're always free to vote against the final deal at the end of the day. And that's the appropriate time. In the interim, you generally ought to keep the process open and moving, noting your objections, but saying, I'm going to continue to work on it. And the final bill comes, if it's not acceptable, go ahead and vote no. But voting no and throwing up barriers at this point doesn't get anything done. But we have some members that seem addicted to doing that, and we certainly have a Democratic minority that is not going to be part of any deal until it's the final deal. And honestly, if you're in the minority and you hold the majority in the other house, as the Democrats do in the Senate, or you have the presidency, as they do in President Biden, then again, you're going to hold out until the end when those people can help negotiate the deal and you're in a stronger position. So some of my colleagues up here have a hard time figuring out the basics of how you negotiate an appropriations bill. But again, we're going to keep working on it. We've had more success than in previous years, but there are times of frustration, and we've had both some success in keeping the government open, but certainly some frustration this week. One other thing I want to mention, since I didn't have a chance to talk to you about this last week, on Friday we had Mike Rogers in Oklahoma in the 4th District. Mike is the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee in a district that has Tinker Air Force Base and Fort Sill and a lot of defense contractors. That's a pretty important deal. But Mike's a big football fan. He's an Alabama fan. And he wanted to see an Oklahoma game. He'd never seen one before. So I promised him if he'd come to Oklahoma, we would make sure he had an opportunity to get to that game and get down on the field. And folks at OU could not have been more accommodating or helpful in making that happen. He got a chance to see the Switzer Center, got a chance to go to the president's box. But from our standpoint, he got a chance to tour Tinker Air Force Base. He got a chance to sit down with some of our major defense contractors around the base, like Boeing, that employ so many of our fellow Oklahomans. And he had a chance to go down to the University of Oklahoma and sit down and talk with them about the literally world-class radar research that's underway at the University of Oklahoma with important applications in the defense world for us. So, it's one of those parts of the job people don't think about, but getting people that are chairmen to come to your district and visit some of your installations and see the work is extremely important when it comes time to appropriating dollars or making policy decisions. So we were really pleased and proud to have Mike in the district, and very pleased that the University of Oklahoma got back to its winning ways on a football field. Since we're going to go play Alabama actually is coming to Oklahoma next year when we're in the Southeast Conference to play us, and we wanted to show him that we had a football team ready to play with those guys, and Saturday it looked like we did, so I was very pleased with that. We'll probably take a break on this next week because next week, after 10 straight weeks in session, Congress is out of session for the Thanksgiving holidays, but I'll be moving around the district. We're certainly going to have plenty of meetings and public gatherings, and then we'll be back at it and see if we can close out the year and get into next year with the government being funded for a longer period of time and some of these knotty issues resolved. So one other thing, the other issues in front of us, of course, are Ukraine aid. That'll be very controversial, and if it's to pass, it'll need to be paired with significant changes in policies on our southern border, which is a very big disaster that the Biden administration has engineered. And we'll have a discussion about what we can do to help our friends in Israel who are under attack and how we could pay for that. So those are big issues that I think Congress will be dealing with later in November and particularly in December when it comes back and focuses on those two big foreign policy issues and trying to fund the government. So until then, good luck, God bless, and certainly have a happy Thanksgiving. I hope you get to spend it with your family, and I hope when you are spending it with your family, you take just a minute in your prayers, or at least in remembrance or appreciation for the men and women we have deployed all around the world in dangerous situations that are out there, making sure that most Americans have the chance to celebrate this holiday in peace and security with their families. That doesn't happen by accident. That takes a great country, and that takes a lot of great men and women in uniform and in intelligence and in border security doing their jobs to make sure that most of us and our families can enjoy the holiday that they often give up in the service of the nation. So remember them in your thoughts and your prayers as you ask for the Lord's blessing on your family in this holiday season and over Thanksgiving. Again, good luck and God bless.